Welcome back, everyone, to episode 141 of Coach Quip. I'm Coach Robyn.
I'm Coach Chris.
And today we are talking about mental health and endurance athletes.
May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and
I'm seeing a lot more this year, I think, than ever before.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's catching on.
Yeah, it's great. And I think in the last maybe 2 years, I've seen a lot more around athletes and mental health.
I totally
Not
agree.
just in May, but kind of throughout the year. So today we're talking about the ways in which endurance athletes are impacted both positively and negatively in terms of mental health through their training. A lot of endurance athletes are often praised for their physical capacity, right? Like being able to run a marathon, very impressive. Not very many people end up doing that, although it might seem pretty common in your running circles, right? If you are a runner or you are a triathlete, like doing an Ironman is part of the conversation, or doing a marathon is not too far of a stretch. But for most people, that is a very impressive physical feat. But for endurance athletes, there's also the mental component of training, and I think that we don't often talk about that. It's not part of training plans necessarily.
And we can't see it, right?
Yeah.
It's not as obvious as, going across the finish line.
Yeah, and so it plays out in different ways for different athletes. So I think let's start off with the positive impacts of endurance training.
First up, I feel like this is the one that everyone always talks about, right? It's endorphin release and a straight up mood enhancement. So we know that physical activity, specifically cardio, is going to really release a lot of endorphins, which is the natural kind of way that we lift our mood, right? Mm-hmm. It's why you feel better after. Funny, I think that a lot of people think that runners feel really good during always. Especially people who don't identify as runners are like, I feel terrible during. I'm like, most runners do too. It's the after that it counts. So that's when we're getting that lift. And that runner's high, or really any cardio high, workout high, is going to offset, anxiety and depression, and provides this really nice sense of joy and improved mood.
I think a lot of runners believe that there is a huge difference between the way that they feel before a run and after a run. Like it's almost like going up a floor, right? And I think for a lot of people, the runner's high is not that noticeable, but it is a slight improvement in their mood. It's just like a more general sense of well-being. And maybe, part of that is the satisfaction of doing something for yourself or doing something that was hard. But I think a lot of people are maybe expecting like a huge boost. Like I don't ever get the runner's high because I don't change that much. So part of it is like understanding what that actually is, that you might actually be seeing the benefits of the runner's high, but it doesn't, it's not like so drastic.
Right, and it's not immediate, right? It can last in little trickles throughout the day.
Right. So along with that is stress reduction. So we know that doing any sort of cardio activity has a great benefit in managing your levels of stress and reducing cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So I think some people can be stressed out by their training, but in the big picture, training with regularity and consistency does provide a release of stress.
And really, endurance training, right, swim, bike, run, it is super repetitive, right? We go over and over and over. It can be very meditative. It can really help athletes kind of clear their minds, find some clarity. We hear this a lot. I personally get it probably the most with swimming, and then running, and then biking, depending on where I'm biking, just because it takes a little bit more brain power to make sure you're staying upright, stay safe. Cardio exercise is really interesting though, because when we do cardio, the creative side of our brain is functioning at a very high capacity. Some that I've read is like 95% of the brain activity that you have when you're doing a cardio exercise with no music. That's an important piece. It can ramp it way high, which is how you have these great thoughts and great focus and great moments of clarity. On the flip side is that your counting side of the brain, the true, going to be able to count and do solid logic is 5%, which is why when you're in the pool trying to count laps and you can't get past 5, or you see someone on the track doing laps and dropping, sticks or stones to count, that's why, because it's very, very hard to count when we're doing a straight cardio exercise with no musical intervention, because we're ramped up creatively.
I feel satisfied hearing this fact because it makes me feel better about my entire swimming and track experience.
Yeah, it's hard to count. That's why simple math is really hard too, right? It's all the same thing. Like you try to add 9 and 3, 14 miles into a run and you're like 75. That's why. So just remember that you're getting the benefit of the creative side, which is really ultimately helping you like manage stress and anxiety too.
Yeah, that's a great explanation for why race math doesn't ever pan out. Yeah.
Don't even go to the decimals. Next up is improved sleep. I definitely noticed this one as long as I don't work out too late in the day. Consistent training we know can really help improve sleep patterns, especially if you are blocking your training in a consistent way and really establishing that rhythm. You're ultimately going to get better rest and better recovery, which is number one training tool or recovery tool. Yep. Is always going to be sleep. There's nothing that trumps that. It's also crucial just for mental health, emotional regulation, cognitive function. I mean, when you are short on sleep, when I take a red eye, I am dumb. I apologize to anyone the next day. I'm probably going to cry about something. I always joke that a 2 is a 10 when we're light on sleep, and we've had a series, right? If a 0 is no emotion and a 10 is you're just falling apart, with something that should be like a 2, like the pug's barking at something, just sends me completely over the edge. Those are all indications that you need to improve your sleep patterns, and really that regular periodized endurance training can really help with that.
This is why I'm such a mess on Fridays.
A 2 is a 10 right now for Coach.
Yeah. Next up is a sense of accomplishment. So achieving training goals and completing your races provide a significant boost to your self-esteem and your confidence. And, in some ways, it doesn't even matter what the outcome of your race is. Just showing up at the starting line is a win. And, that sense of accomplishment of setting a goal and accomplishing the goal of doing a race can really, or even just training, right, can really provide that boost of mental health. The sense of accomplishment really is not limited to just your training. So, and nothing really with training is just specifically limited. This bleeds into the rest of your life. So I think having this sort of positive outlook and greater resilience in training also leads to those same things in your family life, in tough work situations, and so on. So this is why we always say, our training makes us not just better athletes, but better people, better humans. It's the mission of EDGE.
Yeah, and that's, really upheld by you doing the work, but then all of us doing the work together.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we've talked about the positive. Of course, there's going to be the other side of the coin because we need to talk about it. It's real, right? So negative impact of endurance training on mental health. We have a few of these as well. Number one is probably the most obvious, overtraining syndrome. So this is where we know that in order for you to have positive adaptations, we need you to have mild degrees of overreaching, right? Where this is how most plans will go, 2 to 3 build weeks and 1 cutback week. This is why we have you cut back before a big race. It's all a numbers game. But pushing the body beyond its limits without that rest can really start to lead to overtraining. You're going to really start noticing things like chronic fatigue. Your motivation is going to be real low, decreased performance, mental burnout, just not looking forward to things. Again, a couple of workouts here and there, that's normal. But when you start to really string together, this is a really great example of that overtraining kind of taking over. Other symptoms can include irritability, mood swings, and then just a general sense of apathy. I had this happen one season where I think we were opening EDGE, and I had signed up for a half Ironman, which was just dumb. But I think my friends were doing it. And I was so overwhelmed with life. And so the thought of putting 3 sports on top of that, I was just dreading every single workout. And it was pretty awesome when I decided to call it. My coach was, very clear, like this is a time when you are not supposed to be overreaching and overtraining. Just nip it. I was a lot happier. And really, just be honest with yourselves at all times. Like, don't force the issue. If you're getting those feelings, it's for a reason. And there's so much more you can do with your body than the thing you have been doing. So don't think that just means you give up sport entirely.
Yeah. What a great example of stress, right? Like we've talked in this podcast about the seasons of your life, right? So you opening a business and then expecting that you'd be able to train in
dumb.
3 sports.
Yeah.
Like the life stress bleeds over into your fatigue in sport. And we see that with people who are new parents, who have gotten new jobs, who have significant life changes, all things that people should keep in mind. And if you are interested in more information on overtraining, which is very closely related to under-recovering, we did an episode about that. It's episode 102 on overtraining and under-recovering, so you can go back and find out more specifically there. Next up is pressure and anxiety. So negative impacts on mental health. A little bit of pressure is good because it means that we are challenging ourselves, we're pushing our comfort zones. It also can mean that something's important to you if you feel anxiety about something. But there is a threshold of how that is healthy. And so the competitive nature of endurance sports really does lend itself to creating this pressure for people. And this is really specific also to people who don't race very frequently.
Yep.
So, we can put all of our eggs in one basket when we are only racing twice a year. And that amount of pressure can have really large negative impacts on our mental health.
And this is why I ninja race.
Yeah, say more.
I think it's really important, though. I mean, for me, I don't have a tremendous amount of pressure around racing. Like, I don't, again, I've got enough spinning plates. I don't need to do that one too, but I want it to be something that's for me that I can just kind of experience. And I have figured out that by not sharing what I'm doing, by keeping my cards closer to my chest, I just have more excitement and anticipation about it instead of pressure and anxiety or people asking me questions all the time, which is very well intended, but I personally don't need that. So, I encourage you to ninja race. That doesn't mean you don't do the work. It definitely means you do the work, but it just means that you don't always have to share it. And I think there is a pressure for, especially in this ecosystem of like, hey, what are you racing? Right? And now people know that I'm probably just going to lie to them, but when I say nothing, right? But if you don't want to share, don't share. Or share with a select group of people. Right. Maybe we do an episode on ninja racing.
We absolutely should.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful tool. And it's cool, too, to like have people in your circle, and that can really help support you without putting that extra layer of pressure on you, and then it just builds it from there. But that is one big way to reduce the pressure and anxiety, is to just keep it tight.
Yeah, I'm going to lie to you too, if anybody's asking me. I learned this a couple of years ago, that the pressure that I put on myself when other people knew what my races were was far greater than if I wasn't sharing that with people, because I got in my own head about what other people were thinking or what they would, their expectations. And I think particularly for folks who have a more forward-facing social media presence, this can be a great way to alleviate some of that pressure, because it's still important and you can always share after the fact if you want to, but you don't have to feel that pressure of other people's expectations, because the truth is nobody else is out there on race day but you.
Third one is going to be social isolation. This one's real. So especially for people who are getting into either new distances or new sports, training schedules can really lead to social isolation. Athletes might sacrifice, social outings so that they can focus on their regimen. A great example of this is we're coming straight into summer, fall, right? And we know that Friday nights we're going to need to start to be protective of them because we've got early wake-ups. But really that lack of social interaction or that change can make us feel lonely and frankly a little bit removed and depressed. So this is also why, like, we're literally sitting right next to the recovery lounge where people are talking right now. But we place a huge emphasis on that community interaction and that social recovery to ensure that community and connection is part of our training. But that is not always the case, especially for if you're training alone or if you're training with a group that doesn't have a brick and mortar presence.
Yeah, especially if you are like at a workplace where none of your other coworkers or your friend groups, if no one else is involved in what you are involved in, it can be really isolating. So the run groups and run clubs are having a real moment right now, and I think it is because of that social interaction. One way that the social isolation really becomes more prominent is when people are using training as sort of an unhealthy coping mechanism for mental health concerns. Or for other life issues, I guess. One area that we see this is around addiction or around grief. Yep. So I guess it's two areas we see this, around addiction and around grief.
And if you follow athletes, I mean, this is very much, there are a lot of very famous, especially like trail pros, running pros that have turned to endurance for, to offset these issues that they've kind of worked through, and now they're being productive with it. But they are very, very open about it.
Yeah, so replacing one addiction for another. So we do see professional athletes in those, particularly like you said, trail, but also ultra like longer distances. who have moved from substance abuse into really focusing their efforts into endurance training. And there is sort of a line of where that is healthy or unhealthy. So a lot of people have been able to use endurance sports as a way to work through grief. Say they lost a close family member or friend, and instead of turning to substances, they turn and lean heavily into their running or their cycling or what have you. And that can be healthy, but there is a point at which that tips over into unhealthy use of not addressing your actual concerns and not dealing with the other things in your life, and then, really just focusing everything on your endurance training.
Yeah, it should be a tool, not a crutch. Yeah,
exactly. And it is a healthier alternative than substance abuse, but it's not something that we want to, have be our only way of coping with things.
Yep. All right, last is one that, again, you probably saw coming, but it's body image issues. So endurance sports, we're moving our bodies. It can definitely, especially on social media with all these pretty pictures of people, emphasize super lean body types, which can really lead to some pretty unhealthy comparisons and body image issues. Athletes, we know it can absolutely happen. They might develop disordered eating habits, in order to try to match what they're seeing or what they're chasing. I will never forget, this is an aside, my very first training certification was USA Triathlon, level 1. Mm-hmm. And I remember we had such great, it's still, in my opinion, one of the best certifications out there. And I remember sitting with probably 30 other people in our group, and the instructor said, what one thing do all pro triathletes have in common? And I was like, they train hard. And he's like, no. And he was like, and it was actually a mental health segment. He said, no, they're all vain. They all care and he coaches a ton of pros. He's like, they all care what they look like. And I fought it internally, not with him. And then I was like, oh my God, he's right. We have to recognize that as athletes and as coaches. We want to feel strong and look strong, and it's just a matter of what that looks like for our particular body type. Don't compare it to anyone else, but absolutely it is a motivator for so many people who do endurance.
Yeah, I was listening to some former cross-country runners talk about this and about how the idea in their training in high school and college was that leaner and lighter is faster, right? And that is true to a point, but at a certain point it has negative impacts. And people's frames have a big impact here too. Like you can put two people side by side. There's their ideal race weight or what have you won't be the same, and it's going to look different on their bodies too. For us, we think that instead of being lighter, being stronger is really more important. Yep. And so we, again, are really encouraging folks to lean into their strength training to accompany, because you will get more out of the time that you put into strength training than restrictive eating or obsessing over being super, super lean, because you need that strength to get through your training and your racing.
Admittedly, I am way more into female distance running than our dudes. Mm-hmm. Sorry, not sorry. Being at the Olympic trials this year, I was very, very lucky and got to accompany Brittany Romero into, she got to bring a coach with her to the warm-up area, and I was just sitting there really kind of with a lot of the female elites all around me, mm-hmm. and it really struck me how much muscle they have on them now. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And there was a moment where we had warmed up, we had hung out, I had braided hair, glitter was applied, we were ready to go. And they were in the chute, and I got to walk kind of alongside on the other side of the fence. And I remember sitting there and just watching this sea of women go by, and I was so pumped at how muscular they were. I mean, Nell Rojas walked right by me. I'm like, yes, muscle, right? And I think, at least for women, I do think that there is a shift of strong is strong and not lean is strong. And just seeing it firsthand at the trials was super obvious that shift is happening, and I was pumped to see it.
Yeah, love the shift. And I also think that, in the men's side, this is something that we don't typically talk about.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Men are more reluctant to talk about their own internal body image issues, issues with disordered eating, and I think that that's a shift I hope to see in the industry with triathletes and runners as time goes on. But I agree, it's great change. So we've talked about some positives, positive impacts of training on mental health and the negative impacts. Let's talk about how to improve mental health for endurance athletes. So a couple of strategies that we have found. First off is taking a balanced approach to your training. So we can't go hard on every workout. That is definitely not the way to have a fast race time. We need those peaks and those valleys. We need some hard workouts. We need some low intensity workouts. We need adequate rest and recovery because fitness only actualizes
in the recovery phase.
It's been a while.
Like a softball. I just caught it with 2 hands. I'm terrible at catching. Never throw me anything.
It's been a while since we peppered that one in. Good. So we want to make sure that we keep our strength training up, but we also are balancing that with the rest of our workload. The big thing here is listening to your body, and avoiding overtraining is definitely crucial for maintaining positive mental health here. Off seasons are necessary.
Yeah, they serve a purpose, a very specific mental purpose.
Yeah, and if you struggle with knowing when to dial back, or if you are trying to figure out what the right cadence of training looks like for you, a coach might be a good option for you, because I think one of my greatest responsibilities, I think, as a coach, is not pushing people, it's pulling them back.
Yeah.
Because more of our endurance athletes have that mindset of more.
Go!
More is better and faster is better, and there is a real balance to it.
Next up is mental health support. This is one that I do think is getting more attention now than ever. Running, cardio, it might be therapeutic, but it is not therapy. Again, it should be a tool. It should not be your only tool in the toolbox, and it definitely should not be the crutch that is carrying you through your mental health journey. The other problem with it is if you rely on your cardio or your training to be therapy and you get injured, you have nothing to rely on. And you cannot have that as your sole provider there. So regularly consulting with your sports psych, or having a mental health professional to address your psych concerns and your mental health concerns. This is a really, really great way to develop coping strategies and mental resilience, manage stress, manage anxiety. Honestly, and if you're comfortable talking about the fact that you have a therapist, that you have a psych that you like, share it with others, because someone is going to ask you, who are you talking to? And as someone who's done a fair amount of therapy herself, it is wildly alleviating to just give your bundle of issues to someone else for an hour and take it back at the end. It looks different. It feels different. I can, without a doubt, tell you that I'm a better athlete. I'm a better coach. I'm a much better spouse.
Yep.
All of the above, having that 1 hour, twice a month or whatever the cadence is.
Yeah, I think it is 10 out of 10, highly recommend therapy. And I think it can also be really difficult to find somebody that you trust. And so, yeah, definitely the more we can normalize therapy being a part of our ways that we take care of ourselves and helpful to our training, that's a really a benefit for everyone in the community. Next up is mindfulness and meditation. So I've actually started programming in mindfulness, meditation, and visualization for my athletes.
What icons do you use?
The
other?
Yeah. I know. Well, there are limited options.
They should put one in. Training Peaks, listen up. You need to give us a mental health icon. It would not be hard.
No, and it would be a real signal and a push to get more coaches and athletes to consider this a part of their training regimen, which is what I definitely think that this is a big part. Because our practice through meditation and self-awareness, even just taking the time, say you're awful at meditation, which is like a judgmental term. There's not really a way to be awful at it, but for a lot of our athletes, we judge things as good or bad. So say you think that you're not great at meditation, the benefit of just taking 5 to 10 minutes of just silent time to breathe is profound. We just don't do it in our daily life. We're checking our phone in the checkout line. We are checking our phone in the car.
You need to listen to that notification one that we just did, 138.
We need to unplug for sure, but also mindfulness and meditation is just helpful in getting us to stay present, which is so important when we're racing. We know that things will be good and that will pass. We know that things will be potentially awful and that will also pass. So practicing that through meditation can be really helpful. Techniques like deep breathing, visualization, progressive muscle relaxation, all of this can be really beneficial.
And you can do some of this literally laying in bed.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, honestly.
Yeah, and it's something you're already doing. This is where, again, James Clear, we're bringing all the oldies back. This is where really, truly atomic habits and sewing those in and habit stacking. And it's something as like in the morning, I take 10 super long military breaths before I get up. And it like just really helps kind of set that tone for the day. All right, social connections, big time here, right? This is one that we, I think, maybe built a business on. Maintaining really healthy work-life balance and, prioritizing social connections is really, it's a big deal. This is what we call, you all are crazy. If you're listening to this, you are probably identified as an endurance athlete. You electively suffer. You electively choose to suffer. You pay to do it. That's messed up and amazing, right? As a group, we call that collective elective suffering. And that is a really, really cool thing because it's a bunch of people that are wanting to work hard together, be a little bit vulnerable, and really pick each other up when they're down and have that yin yang and accomplish big things. So how do we do that? When it comes to endurance sports, joining a running club, joining a training group. Lucky for you, if you're doing the half or a full, we have literally a new season starting on June 10th. All of those things really provide a sense of community and belonging. They help reduce those feelings of isolation. And I mean, that's why, honor the sweat bond is one of our axioms because it really speaks to that connection that happens when we collectively suffer together. They can also boost our recovery as well and like literally make you recover faster because post-workout connecting can emphasize everything that you're doing and really start to start stacking bricks even faster. That is episode 96 of Coach Quip on social recovery is probably one of my favorites. Tune into that one.
Me too, one of my favorites for sure, and I can't believe it was that long ago.
Either these are going faster or we're getting older.
Both. All right, next up is nutrition and hydration. Proper nutrition and hydration are critical for maintaining everything in your life, essentially, but energy levels and a good mental outlook are two of the big benefits there. So I know, like, I tell my athletes in races, if you start to feel emotional, you have to eat. eat and drink. Like, if you start to feel super angry or like you are just checking out or
unraveling.
Bored. Yes, unraveling is a good one, yeah. Mm-hmm. Working with a nutritionist to develop your sort of ideal balanced diet for both in training and out of training is super helpful, something we definitely recommend. And if that's not a path that you want to take, then just making notes on your own. And this is part of the reason why a lot of our coaches have athletes make notes in training peaks after their workouts about sort of their mental state, because it does relate to their nutrition and hydration.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least is setting realistic goals. So give yourself some achievable and realistic goals. Don't go into crazy town when you're setting these because you're just going to burn yourself out. But if we keep them kind of in a more normative linear pattern, and you're going to actually address some of these negative effects of how we feel about possibly failing, right? Mm-hmm. Celebrate the small victories along the way. You can stay positive, you can stay driven. I have an athlete that's gearing up for a longer distance gravel race, and he's hitting a lot of really great all green weeks. And are they the highest mileage he's going to do in training? Of course not. We're not there yet, right? But he is stacking some great bricks. And like for me, that's really wild. Also, why it's helpful to have a coach to point those out. But like I we get pumped about that. I would say I am more proud of my athletes with the smaller milestones than the big ones.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like those are the ones that that take that real true like guts, grit, and determination day in and day out.
Particularly around consistency.
Yes.
I think that's such a big one because so many of our athletes measure success by the number on the watch when they cross the finish line in a race.
Yeah.
And not enough of our athletes are really paying attention to the process of getting there.
Yeah.
And that's a huge one. So we talked about the positive and negative impacts of training on mental health and gave you some of the tools that we thought of to improve your mental health through your training. We look forward to seeing your ways that you are taking care of your mental health. Tag us on your social posts and
share it with others. It will only help the groups.
Exactly. All right.
Till next time.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip. Original music performed by Mend. Follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.